Welcome to this Q&A session for the film I Love You, I Miss You, I Hope I See You Before I Die, which is part of the 31st edition of Nordisk Panorama Film Festival. The film is not only nominated for New Nordic Voice, it also has a chance to win the Audience Award. So don't forget to vote online after this session. My name is Robert Goodman, and I'll be the host of this Q&A, and I have the pleasure of talking with Eva Marie Rødbro, who is the director of I Love You, I Miss You, I Hope I See You Before I Die. So Eva, what attracted you to tell this story?
Hi, Robert. Yeah, thank you for your question. Many things, but let me start by saying this project was one of these projects that I had initiated a long time before. And I think in my work in general, it's like the different projects are connected, like communicating with each other. So one gets born and then it has a sibling and then something starts and it needs to be done later. And then it's all about figuring out the timings of which and what. But in all my work, and especially like this film is connected to the very first film I ever made. So it's very special to me. And it's also my first longer documentary. I've been making shorts and TV shows for some years now. This one, it's kind of like the birth of like me getting into film. And the girl in the film is the girl that I've known for 10 years now. And I met her whenever I was starting making film, and she became a really good friend of mine. I met her because I was looking for her. I went to the States, to a small town that has almost the same like size of the town I grew up in myself, in like rural northern Denmark. And it's a film that wanted to try and see, I was going around in different places and making like kind of experiments, little projects, trying to see if I could capture or like investigate like the energy of being like a young soul, restless soul with like all of that, like both very like, I don't know, like a lot, all this like trapped energy inside of you, and everything that you do when you don't have anything to do, and everything you do when you are kind of like away from school, parents, system, eyes that looks at you. And then how can you make a collab, or like how can you make a film in that space? Because it's the same things that happens in most of the youth cultures around the world. I mean, it's the same things that you do when you don't have anything to do. And it was a project that was about that. This is a continuation. I'm sorry for like...
No, that's all right. I mean, I was going to ask you a little later on because about some of the themes in your work.
Exactly. So, but the thing is, I'm always interested in group dynamics. I guess all of my works are about families of sorts. But this film, I Love You, is the first film that's about a real blood family. It's always been about groups of friends or people who identify as family because of what they do and where they feel they belong. But this project is it's the first one that's really about a blood family. And that's what the film is really about. It's about heritage and what you pass on to your children and what you have been passed on yourself. And I was attracted to telling this story because I've known these people, this family, since the young adult, the protagonist of the film, was a kid herself. And knowing her, like the way she struggled with everything, it's been like in my heart and on my mind to try together with her and see if we could make a film at one point in her life that tells the story of now being a grown-up, whatever that means.
Well, even for those over a certain age, we're still figuring it out.
Yeah, I know.
So explain how you originally met her, because, Colorado Springs is hardly on anyone's landscape, except for those of us who've lived in Colorado. And it's also interesting that you decided to make this story for your first feature-length project in the U.S. You grew up, as you said, in a small town in northern Jutland. This Colorado Springs is pretty far from there, or maybe it's not.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's arrogant to say that geography is not such a big force, because of course it is, but there's a lot of cultures going on in everywhere. So, and one of the things that I share with this family is like the more rural culture, you know, like growing up knowing that wherever you live is really far away from anywhere important, and feeling really far away from the main center of the world. That's something that we share, and that I feel that this is also about. You know, in this film I've tried to isolate also, like you don't really see where you are. Also, you don't really see Colorado Springs. You see the mountains a little bit, but it's always like, you know, just a passing of a mountain from the car. You don't get a description of where you are, the landscapes or the city. You just stay in the cars and inside the house. And it's a very close-up, fragmented film where it's more about this, like the state of mind of being in a, like the sensation, like maybe even the bodily sensation of being in a room and being with yourself and being with the people who are always around you and you can't get away from, even if you.
Well, it's also, Colorado Springs is kind of one of those very American places that there's almost no there.
Yeah.
It's very kind of suburban, strip mall, you know, not, it doesn't have, you know, like a European city, a center in the same sense.
It's like a lot of other places that you drive through, I feel like.
Yeah.
Definitely. I wasn't very attracted to it when I first came there. I would have never stayed there and made a film there had it not been for the family moving there from Texas. I met them. I mean, I initially.
Where did you originally meet them?
We got to know whenever they met. And they lived in Texas, where they come from, and they went up a couple of states because Texas is a hard place to live if you struggle with the law and you are very and you're poor, and it's just a tougher place to live for many people. So they leave the state. In Colorado is easier. It's also legal. Oh, it's also legal to smoke weed there, and a lot of people's lives are eased by that, so they don't have to, you know, so they don't have to break the law every time they.
Right.
Yeah.
So I started to ask you about some of the other themes in your work. You mentioned that this is the first one about really about a family that's actually a blood-related family, but in looking at some of your past short films, a lot seems to be about young people in the process of becoming adults. And what are some of the other themes in your work that you're going to continue to explore?
Continue to explore. Well, a lot of them are the same, isn't it? Amazing how.
Yeah, except I think we all tend to rotate around, you know, one particular thing that you know, I guess we need to explain to ourselves, and so it comes out in your film.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think I'd say that my films are always about, family and group, you know, and also maybe about becoming, not necessarily coming of age, but about becoming something. In this film, it has a pretty specific way of dealing with that, or playing around with that, because it's, you get to know one girl, but then she has a daughter, and throughout the film, the daughter kind of takes over the role of protagonist, because the film is also not explaining or cutting, or like not wanting to say this is how it is exactly, but it's suggesting that there's a circular life going on with this family as an example. Like now we talk about this family, but it's not like a unique story. There's not a unique story going on in this film. It's a very genuine story of life that is very recognizable, and it could happen actually in many places in the world. I'd say it could also really happen here in my city, in Copenhagen. Like it could go on here. It would be, some parameters would be different, but the core of it would be the same.
Well, I think the social service safety net in Copenhagen and Denmark and in the Nordic countries is an order different than really the very wide mesh social safety net in the U.S.
Yeah, it's totally, but it's possible to fall through everywhere, also here. Yeah. But it's definitely, I mean, it's pretty horrific, the state of the social security network in the States right now, and it seems to only be getting worse, I must say. But yeah, so it's also, I mean, so in that, you can say in that sense, it's also a political film, because it also does want to talk about, like, just the state of how it looks when children grow up without any real adults anywhere. Like nobody went to school for real, not even finishing high school,
Right.
None of the parents. And the question is, will they?
Yeah, I mean, as a child, how do they survive that and figure out, what the possibilities are for themselves?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you whether you see some parallels between the women in this film and the women you filmed for your TV series, Prinsessa from Blaken.
Yeah, definitely some, yeah. I mean, some which are that they are, how do you say that? They're like kind of like sturdy and stubborn and like this, they're hard, They stand up for themselves and they
have what we would call attitude.
They have attitude, definitely. They have language, and they have they'll protect themselves, and they have maybe definitely tried to give somebody a beating before, if that's what was necessary. But they also come from, maybe they have similarities in also maybe not having always been, definitely not always been understood, also have all experience being looked down upon in society as trash or it's cheap, which are the words which unfortunately will be used, and also have they all share also having been neglected or maybe even abused early on in life. So.
And were most of the women in the TV series also from kind of lower middle working, little lower class, middle class, working class? I mean, I'm not quite sure how people talk about it here, but in the U.S., the women in your film "I Love You, I Miss You" are clearly, in the lower class. Lower economic class.
Lower economic class. I think that's a good term. And I don't
want to suggest that they're somehow lower than anybody else, but that they come from a much reduced financial circumstances.
Definitely, yeah. And that's the same case. I think I'm really brought up with a very always it's a big it's always going to be a theme since I was very little. It's always like the injustice of society is always very extremely relevant to me to talk about and deal with, and keep figuring out ways to talk about without it being a repetition, because it doesn't ever really change, and I know it maybe will never heal completely, and we'll never become. I mean, I don't believe necessarily in harmony, or unfortunately, but it's still important to I feel that even the conversation about class is not very, like, people don't want to talk about it.
No, I think you know, certainly in Denmark, it's a completely different set of circumstances than it is in you know, kind of a very well-defined edge society like
Still, yeah,
England.
it's true, but it's like the privileged are the also like the ones like also controlling the media, and like the people who with more privileges, they don't want to talk about the consequences of the class society. They just don't want to. And also right now, like with the COVID-19 and stuff, we
Oh,
have
yeah.
like we have now like they'd rather even the media will rather talk about uh, race than class. It's pretty amazing. I'm really flabbergasted about it actually, like how it's going on in Danish media right now. That Somali people are more likely to get, uh, you know, infected, which is sick, which is crazy. Nobody want to talk about class. Okay, let's not go too far down this lane, but I'm just saying that's definitely what I'm concerned with mainly as a core like motivation in my work. But the way I deal with it is not trying to make like slogan or like I'm not a protester. I'm more
Right.
like a painter or oh I don't know. You know, I'm more like
Well,
trying to
I mean, this is clearly an observational film.
yeah.
And
Exactly.
so I have two final questions for you. One is, where does the title come from? Because it's, I mean, um, I love you, I miss you, I hope I see you before I die, uh,
Yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
mouthful, but
It's awful. I don't know. I couldn't clearly you can understand that I couldn't come up with the title, so I picked the working title for it, which was it's just the title that's always been there because it's something that Betty, the girl in the film, always said to me, like throughout the years when we talk on the phone. And I just always, it was like I wrote it in capital letters and I just had it with me. And I felt like such a graffiti, like it felt like such a graffiti that totally, like, kind of like describes the core of her personality or like where she comes from in life, you know, that like big words, like big statements, also like very almost corny, like, you know, postcard statements, but also the idea or like the concept that you could die anytime, you know, who knows if we're going to see each other again, whatever, but still like with all the passion and all the passion, but also at the same time, like kind of
hands off.
cynicality. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. It just I felt like okay, it's not gonna. This film cannot have a simple title. I wish it could, but it couldn't. Now it's this.
Okay, and the last question is, so what are you working on next?
Is that a secret?
It's a secret? Okay, well, you don't have to tell me.
I've been on a baby. I had a baby in between, so I'm basically I've been working on being a mother for the last year, which is amazing and which is so beautiful in connection to this film because this film was all about motherhood as well. That's kind of another big theme in this film. And then I am also working on a couple of projects which has to do with groups of girls. But one is a documentary series. Yeah, I actually can I don't I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, well, that's fine. I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes great ideas get erased in by talking about them.
exactly, because I'm actually writing on it right now.
Okay, so
Whenever I have a minute to myself.
okay, well, thank you for participating in this Q&A, Eve, and thanks to the audience for watching. Remember, there are many other fascinating films to enjoy, so please tell your friends, and don't forget to vote for the Audience Award.
Thank you. Bye bye.